some news. One thing, I found out how to run Llama 3 locally. This is Meta's new open source model. Seems to be the most powerful LLM I've ever seen, and it is incredibly easy. They give you this thing called OLL Llama. You just download it and run it on your PC or your Mac. So I've got it running right here. And you can ask it questions like, why is the sky blue? And it will have an intelligent answer. With the usual stuff. Unlike the other ones I've tried, if you ask it the same question multiple times, it doesn't give you different stupid answers. And it's even pretty good at doing arithmetic, which most of them can't do at all. I did find a question it couldn't answer, though. Down here, some students were doing a project where they had to subtract 2 times. And so I tried this one. How many seconds are between these 2 times? Whenever it's done with this. All right. If I ask it how many seconds are between 14:46:01 and 14:46:06, it's obviously 5 seconds. And let's see how it does. Yep, there we go. All right, that one it could do, although it did it differently last time I asked it. Now let's see if it can do this one, because it was unable to do this one when I tried it yesterday, and it shouldn't be learning. It's a local LLM running right directly on my Mac here. It's not in the cloud, it's not getting updated. Okay, there we go. So this is between 14:46 and 14:48. So the answer should be something like 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes from that. Ooh. It got the right answer this time. Now, last time it said there was an hour. So that's interesting. Anyway, so that's the kind of thing. I'm surprised you can run this thing locally and it runs so well. It's very nice. So China has a plan for brain-computer interfaces. Neuralink, Elon Musk company, is doing this, but they're mostly talking about people that have medical problems, so they need this. But in China, they're primarily working on ones that do not have to be implanted, where you can wear something like a hat or a helmet, and they're trying to make them to enhance healthy humans to have more power and make military applications. So, that's China's not the least bit shy about this. Enhancement of healthy people is a goal of their research, which is something they haven't talked about a lot in America yet. So, car makers tell you that they won't share your physical location data and sell it for money or give it to the government without warrants, but it turns out that's a lie. Most of them just share it without a warrant or a court order, despite having publicly pledged not to do so. So if anybody's surprised by that, you haven't been paying a lot of attention, as the privacy, they call this the information capitalism. The information about what we're doing turns out to be very valuable, and people are selling it over and over and over again everywhere. Marriott, this article is very unclear to me. It's at CSO Magazine by Evan Schuman, and this person, somebody in the loop here, doesn't seem to understand encryption at all. Marriott claims they were using encryption when they got breached, and I don't think they said AES-1. There is no such thing, and if there was, that wouldn't be secure. I think they said AES-128, which is what it says down here. Now, that's recommended encryption, and that would be fine. But now they say instead of that, they were using SHA-1 to store credit card numbers, which makes no sense at all. The point of a hashing algorithm is it's one way. You can hash something, but it's very difficult or impossible to reverse it. So if you store something like a password in a hashed form, then you can tell if someone enters the correct password by running it through the hash and comparing the hashes, and that's what hashes should be used for. But if you were storing credit card numbers that way, you wouldn't be able to use them to make purchases because they're scrambled and you can't get them back. So this is very strange. These two forms of encryption are not alternatives where you can move from one to the other. These are just performing different operations that are not the same at all. And the experts they quote in this article don't seem to know what they're talking about either. They say SHA-1 is broken and you can crack SHA-1 easily, and it's not that simple at all. Anyway, this article seems to me like something written by attorneys who don't even know what the encryption terms mean, and are just throwing them around without understanding them. Right, and so a Finnish hacker hacked a psychotherapy clinic, stole the records, and then extorted the victims, the people who had been going in for therapy, saying he would release their records if they didn't pay him money. 24,000 people. So it's he's locked up now, and like I say, ruthless and very damaging. This reminds me of BetterHelp, the main online therapy center I used to hear ads for all the time on podcasts, and it turned out that they were recording the sessions and using them for advertising without telling people. But I think they didn't get shut down or anything for that. I think they just got ordered to knock it off. So Docker has had millions of malicious containers planted on them. Now, Docker is a place where you store containers, which are like virtual machines, where you can download them and run them locally, and you'll have things like Apache servers and all sorts of things. But people put ones up there that have no image, so there is in fact nothing to download, but apparently there is a link to a web page where you can read about it, and those web pages had malware. So they were just putting them up there as a sort of spam to trick people into clicking on them and seeing a malicious web page. And apparently this went on for 5 years before anybody caught on. Let me check for comments in the chat. There are none. All right, so Google is going to give $1,000 a month to some homeless people in San Francisco. This has been tried many times, and it turns out to be extremely successful. If you take people that are desperately poor and you give them $500 or $1,000 a month, typically they greatly improve their lives. They usually end up getting a medical treatment fixed, they fix their car, they get a better job. Something like 3/4 of them within a year are living better lives, and they don't need to continue receiving the money. This is why advocates like Andrew Yang of Universal Basic Income point this out. It's been tried many times. It's extremely successful. I first saw this in the 1960s from Milton Friedman, who was a right-wing economist, but all he said is if you just take the number of people at different income levels, there's something like 10 or 15% of Americans below the poverty line, and if you just gave them all enough money to bring them up to the poverty line, that would be much less cost than we have now with all our welfare and food stamps and everything. Just from a purely global economic argument, that would be a far more efficient system than our current system, which goes to all kinds of efforts to limit what you can get and make you fill out forms and make you meet requirements. So they spend a whole bunch of money on administrators trying to prevent you from getting the money instead of just giving money to people who need it. Of course, this is based on the Puritan position from centuries ago that if people were to get money without having to work for it, then they would get lazy and exploit it. And in practice, that is not generally true. It's true of some number of people, maybe 10 or 15%, but most people are not that way. Most people would like to get a job and take care of themselves. They just have obstacles from extreme poverty that mean they're trapped. So this is very interesting. Passkeys, you probably heard about them. Microsoft's been pushing this for a while, and Google, you can log in with a passkey without having a password. But, as he points out, this is one of the guys that worked on passkey. In fact, he writes the Rust library for passkeys, and he says, now I've given up on it. He said it's useless. He said what happened is several different companies made their own independent proprietary version that does not interoperate with the others. And of course, the thing is only useful if you can use it everywhere. And he said, he talks about how this happened. Various different companies each made their own individual version that doesn't work right. They don't work together. Chrome messed it up. And so one way after another, he said it's pointless, and we're probably just going to stick with the current system where you get a password manager and you have these passwords everywhere. That's the system we're probably stuck with. These passkeys were hoped to be the end of passwords, but it doesn't seem to be working. And here's another one. The wireless carriers have been selling your customer location data. Sprint, AT&T, T-Mobile, and Verizon illegally sharing access to your location data without consent. So, paid fines of $200 million. That's part of the surveillance economy. And Safari. In the EU, they now are forced by European law to permit you to load apps on an iPhone from outside the iPhone App Store. So they did it through Safari. They added a new scheme to Safari called Marketplace Kit. That's like HTTP or HTTPS. So you go to a Marketplace Kit URL, and then it sends signals to the server, and it figures out where you're going. But what they did was they they made a mistake in planning this, so European phones can now be tracked by these signals. The signals back and forth contain an identifier of your phone, and there's a way to point them to a third party by just having a malicious marketplace URL. So they say this can be used to track people, like tracking cookies. So they're going to have to improve this to improve the privacy of it. All right. I think that's enough of that.